Hey, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory is due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakudash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who all in this truth from him do well. Peace and salutations to the 144,000 and the rest of the elect. Unto you I say shalom. Coming to you back with another lesson through the Spirit. Now I'm entitled this one, Selling Out to the Enemy Leads to Destruction. Because you have a lot of Israelites that are claiming to be in the truth that have made it evident that they've sold out to the enemy, which our number one enemy that wants to do away with us, the nation of Israel, of the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, is no other than the so-called white man, which is Esau Edom. He's the main one that pays our own people to follow whatever Esau Edom's agenda is, which is ultimately to destroy our people, to lead our people away from Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, to further the degenerate behavior that Babylon the Great America pushes. And now you have these so-called Israelites that are in the truth, which ultimately we know they're not because of what they're teaching, but really they at one point in period they knew the truth, and they still know it, but now they're teaching a complete different doctrine because whatever Esau Edom tells them to teach, they have to teach it, because once they get that bag for however much amount, whatever Esau Edom gave them, now they got to do what the so-called white man tells them to do. Because if not, just like these celebrities, these rappers, these actors, they get out of line. For example, Kanye West, and these different celebrities that stepped out of line and went against the agenda of Esau Edom, the tiny caps, the so-called white people. He puts them back in place. He takes their bank account. He blackmails them. He pushes out this anti-whatever person they are agenda. And ultimately, that's what these other Israelites have done. They sold out to Esau Edom. We can't say 100% sure before what they're doing, going completely against what Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai told us to teach the destruction of America, to teach the proper breakdown of the MOTB, which is the micro hib, to teach who salvation is for, which is only for Israel. But, these other camps are not teaching that. They're not pushing Yahweh Shai. They're not pushing, majority of the New Testament, only when it fits their agenda. So ultimately, that's how the majority of these other Israelite camps, they've sold out. And a lot of them newer camps, they're simple as all hell. But a lot of these camps, they used to follow the One West doctrine, the 12 tribes, teaching who the enemy is, teaching that heathens can't make it, and now they're completely teaching something else. So ultimately, these jakes, they're trying to find a consolation on this side because really they lack faith. They don't see that the kingdom of heaven is right around the corner, so they're trying to get it on this side. And Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai is going to allow them to, or he's allowing them, to get the bag, to get the money, because they're impatient. But like the scripture says, woe unto you that lost patience. What end is it to you? And ultimately is destruction. A lot of them are going to take the micro hib, the MOTB, and they're going to get hit by those missiles because their lack of faith, their lack of patience, their lack of long suffering. So Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai is about to do a number on these false prophets that they have sold out to the enemy, along with these other celebrities they've sold out to Esau Edom, because they couldn't wait, for the kingdom of heaven. A lot of these celebrities know the truth too, but that they choose to leave that life behind so they can follow after Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. No. So, these jakes that have sold out to the enemy, they're about to get their judgment sooner than later. This is Matthew chapter 16 and verse 25. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. And that's why majority of these jakes, they've sold out. because they think that, oh shit, I need to get it on this side, because they don't have the vision. The Yahweh Shemel Shai didn't give them the spirit to see that the destruction of America is nigh, and right after that, the kingdom of heaven. So that's why they're trying to save their life on this side. That's why when that MOTB gets made mandatory, and all these Israelite camps lose their so-called wealth, they're going to be begging for it. They're going to be begging for the, that MOTB, the micro CHIP, to be able to get that so-called wealth that they've built up over the years on this side. But that's going to lead to their destruction. That's why the elect, they're forsaking this life. They're arising and departing because we know that this isn't our rest. We know that this place is polluted and it's about to be destroyed. So ultimately, that's that contrast between the elect and then the 2/3 jakes, these false prophets. It says, verse 26, For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? So it don't profit you at all to sell out to Esau, Edom, to sell out on this side, because we know that this world's about to end. This current age, this current aeon being ran by the so-called white man. And a lot of these jakes, the reason why they chose to sell out, because they don't really believe that this kingdom, it's about to collapse, that it's, and it's collapsing, it's crumbling. But, their mindset is, okay, now I'm going to sell out and enjoy these riches, for however long this place has left. And a lot of Israelites, especially these false prophet camps, that took the bag, they have the 501c3. A lot of them really don't believe that America's about to be destroyed, because Yahweh Shemel Shai didn't give him faith. He didn't give him the spirit to see, oh, damn, this place is crumbling, it's circling the drain. The dollar's about to be done away with, but like the scripture says, these 2/3, they're not going to be in the spirit like the elect, because just like Moses, like the scripture said, I think in Romans, Moses chose to suffer with his people, than to enjoy sin, for a period of time in Egypt, and that's the spirit of the elect in, unlike these 2/3 that, rather, fulfill the lust of the flesh, and so they could get the cars and the hoes and the jewelry and the fame and the clout. They couldn't wait. They wanted that fame. They wanted their consolation on this side. So Yahweh Shemel Shai allowed them, okay, you can't wait. You can't wait for the kingdom of heaven. You can't wait on Yahweh Shai. Then, okay, here, take this. But it's going to lead to the destruction. And that's what's going to happen to these false prophet camps, these Israelite camps. They sold out to Esau, Edom. This is Proverbs 14 and verse 12. And it reads, There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And that's the mindset of these false prophet camps. They've sold out. Their mindset of, nah, what I'm doing is right. I made a merchandise out of the truth. I'm getting a bag. So, it can't be all bad if I'm getting money. God is blessing me with all this money because I'm teaching this truth. And in a way, they're right. Okay, yeah, Yahweh Shemel Shai is giving you that money, and that fame, and that wealth, and whatever, a vainglory that they've been looking for their whole lives, because they've been losers their whole lives. And now that they got a little fame, now they trying to, expand it more and more, instead of just being content with teaching the truth, with teaching what Yahweh Shemel Shai commanded us to do. To go out there and blow the trumpet, help seal the elect, warn our people from the incoming destruction so they could be delivered. But, these jakes, they're just teaching, just for the bag, debating, being in all these different podcasts and Hebrew Israelite rap battles. So Yahweh Shemel Shai is about to show Israel what happens when you teach for vanity, when you teach, for ill-gotten gains. This is 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. And that's the spirit that the elect are going to be in. Godliness, being able to teach this truth, to have this truth, to have the spirit of Yahweh Shemel Shai, to be able to go out there and teach Israel, while the rest of these jakes, they weren't content with that. So Yahweh Shemel Shah allowed him, okay, you're not content, with the lot I gave you. You want to be the number one guy in Israel. You want to be, they're in that spirit that they want to be the main guy. They want to be the main character. But ultimately, Yahweh Shai is the main character. But, these Jakes, they're not happy with that. They want more. It says, verse 7, for we brought nothing into this world, but it is certain we could carry nothing out. Verse 8, and having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. Yeah, and Yahweh Shemel Shai provides for his servants, just the right amount to be able to do the work, to go to camp, to put up these electronic epistles. But yet, that wasn't enough for these sellout Jakes. They wanted more, that they seen, like it says in Psalm 73, they were envious at the wicked. So they wanted that same status, as Esau, Edom. I want to drive the cars. I want to, have all the women, along with looking at these celebrities, the rappers. That's why they have that worldly twist, to their camps, that rap Hebrew Israelite twist, the diamond chains and the Hellcats and the popping the bottles at the clubs, having Passover at the clubs, so they weren't content with just being able to do the work. And that's why they sold out, but like the scripture says right here, having food and raiment, let us be their content, and the elect, they're going to be content with just having just enough to be able to do the work, and every lot is different for each brother. But Yahweh Shemel Shai is going to provide just enough to be able to push the work out, which that's what it's all about. It's not about getting rich on this side, getting all the hoes, getting all the cars and the jewelry and the Instagram followers. No, that's all vainglory. And really, that's all about to be done away with when the system collapses. Then Yahweh Shemel Shai is going to really show who he's dealing with. Verse 9, but they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. Yeah, and that's, majority of these other Israelite camps, they've sold out. They took the 501c3, Esau, Edom, rolled up on them in a black limo with black tinted window. You're like, okay, teach this, teach that. Shit, Vocab Malone might have pulled up on him. Like, if you teach this, shit, here you go, a couple thousand. And every week, just change it up. And here go another couple thousand. And that's what these other camps did, because it's evident that they're not teaching the 100% truth. A lot of them don't even push the names. They don't push the proper breakdown of the MOTB. They don't push that all hell's about to break loose. So ultimately, that's how they a lot of them took the bag. We can't say 100% for sure, but it's like, damn, if at one point in time and period they were actually teaching the truth, and for them to just change it up all of a sudden, that's letting you know, like, damn, okay, well, what made them just go way off to the end, to the point where, like, they just completely changed the doctrine. Ultimately, a lot of them got pulled up on them with, Esau, Edom pulled up on them, with the bag, and then they, it's obvious they took something, because it's like, damn, a lot of Jake never seen that much money for them to just get a large some amount of money at one point. Like, oh shit, I'm gonna take it. Just like these rappers and these celebrities. Verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. And that's what a lot of these Israelite false prophet camps are about to do. They're about to pierce themselves with that MOTB, with that charagma. Because when Esau Edom crashes his system, when he collapsed this economy, all that so-called wealth, fame, glory, clout, that's about to be taken at the snap of a finger. And, these Jakes that got in their constellation on this side, and then Esau Edom takes it away, they're going to be begging for it. They're going to be begging for the Hellcat bag. They're going to be begging for the mansions and the jewelry and the hoes. And, okay, Esau Edom's going to be like, okay, take this micro C-hip. Take this MOTB. And ultimately, these camps, they said that was in the MOTB. So, for them, they're going to take it because they don't really believe in the proper breakdowns that Yahweh Shemel Shai, imparted unto our apostles and elders and bishops on down, to teach Israel. So ultimately a lot of them, they couldn't wait. They lost patience, so they're like, man, fuck it, I'm gonna go get the bag. I don't believe that the MOTB, the micro CHIP, is about to be implemented. I don't believe that America is about to be destroyed by thermonuclear missiles. That's what these Israelite camps that are teaching false doctrine, that's their mindset, because Yahweh Shemel Shai didn't give them the spirit to understand, what times we're in. Measuring the times diligently. This is 1 John chapter 2 and verse 15. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And that's what majority of these Israelite camps that have sold out are doing. They don't really love Yahweh Shemel Shai. They don't really do what Yahweh Shemel Shai commanded them to do. They're doing their own will, but really, man's going to of the Lord. There's no such thing as free will. Like it says in Job chapter 33, Yahweh Shemel Shai puts it upon their mind, while they're asleep, to whatever they're going to do. So Yahweh Shemel Shai did put it upon their spirit while they were asleep to go the hell off, to sell out, to teach that heathens can make it and all sorts of madness, because ultimately they're like, nah, I'd rather, stay in the world. I'd rather, teach this false doctrine so I can get this bag. But that's how Yahweh Shemel Shai is not dealing with that, because they're teaching completely contrary to what the scriptures are saying. Verse 16, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. Verse 17, and the world passeth away and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of Yahweh Shemel Shai abideth forever. And ultimately, who are the ones who are doing the will of Yahweh Shemel Shai in truth and sincerity are going to be the elect, not these false Israelite camps that are teaching all sorts of madness of doctrine, teaching that the heathens can make it, teaching that the MOTB is in the micro CHIP, that the MOTB is white women, that is sin. That there's not going to be any Jacob's trouble, that we already went through that. But that's ultimately because Yahweh Shemel Shai, if they did have the spirit at one time point of period, he took it off them. He took the oil off them. That's why they're teaching a worldly friendly doctrine, teaching that America is not going to be destroyed, teaching that the kingdom of heaven is a easy path. You don't have to go through the straight gate. So ultimately that's how that these false Israelites, camps that are teaching false doctrine, they really sold out, because they're not teaching what Yahweh Shemel Shai told us to teach. This is James chapter 4 and verse 4. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that friendship of the world is enmity with Yahweh Shemel Shai? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of Yahweh Shemel Shai. And you get that word enmity. That word enmity, it says, Strong's G2189, extra, it says hostility. These false Israelite camps, they're teaching false doctrine. They're hostile towards the true man of the Lord. It says a reason for opposition. And what's the reason that they're opposing what Yahweh Shemel Shai commanded us to do? Because they're comfortable with this world. They don't want this world to end. They're buddies with these podcasters and Vocab Malone now. So ultimately that's how Yahweh Shemel Shai is not dealing with them, because they're friends of the world. Now they're shoulder to shoulder with these people in the world. They're known enemies to the nation of Israel. That are teaching that the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans aren't the real Israelites, teaching that all nations can make it, that all nations can be saved, But that's who these other Israelite camps, these jakes that are sellouts, that's what they're teaching. But that's That's okay, because Yahweh Shemiel Shai is reserving them for judgment. A lot of them, he's reserving them to take that MOTB. This is Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve Yahweh Shemiel Shai and Mammon. And, these Israelites that, took the bag, they can't serve Yahweh Shemiel Shai and serve, their belly. They can't serve, chasing a bag and trying to be established in this world. But that's what they're doing. They're serving Mammon instead of serving Yahweh Shemiel Shai. But we all know what that's about to lead to. That's going to lead to the destruction of these wicked ass 2/3, these celebrities they've sold out, these 501c3 camps, these so-called Christian churches. They're all about to get it. They're all about to be made an example of what happens when you sell out to the enemy, when you sell out to Esau, Edom. Ultimately, it's going to be destruction. It's going to be death. A lot of jakes are going to be getting put to death, during their live sermons, during when they're out there on the highways and byways, to be made an example of what happens when you make a merchandise out of the truth, when you make a merchandise out of Yahweh Shemiel Shai's house. But that's pretty much the point. I pray this is edifying to the elect. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem HaKadosh. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who all in this truth from who to rule well. Peace and salutations to the 144,000, the rest of the elect. Unto you I say shalom.